Yo, what's going on, everyone? It's your boy Ben and JB from JBM Sports Media. And we have a topic today I didn't expect that we were going to talk about at all, but it just came out of nowhere. And yes, we are talking about the Tony Clark situation right here. MLB Players Association Executive Director Tony Clark resigned after an internal investigation that revealed he had an inappropriate relationship with his sister-in-law, God help me, who had been hired by the union in 2023. Sources tell Jeff Past and DVN Jr. On X. JV, right off the bat, I'll throw it to you. When you saw that headline pop up, what did you think?
To be honest with you, I didn't know there was that much of a scandal behind it. I thought maybe he was just like, I'm kind of done. I don't want to go through these negotiations. I think maybe they need a new voice. And then you hear that not only was there a potential inappropriate relationship with his sister-in-law, but there's also the misusage of funds stemming to like a kids league or something like that was sponsored by the MLB, and how they were using funds for this youth league. Now there's a whole big investigation, that's being used by the federal government. Now it's not just excuse me, it's not just an inappropriate relationship. It's kind of crazy now, and this is just a massive blow for the MLBPA that they have to find a new director. And interesting enough, he's been the director since 2013, so it's a 13-year run where he's been the voice of reason for the MLBPA. He's gone through 2 negotiations. He also negotiated in 2022 that 99-day lockout that the MLB had, actually, that kind of went under the table that nobody really remembers. And he negotiated that final CBA, before this one ends in 2026 in December. So it's just going to be really interesting to see how the MLBPA pivots and finding, some new blood and a new voice, because Tony Clark was somebody that was for the players. He felt like they should get these big contracts and that owners should spend, and he was against the salary cap. So the players are going to want somebody that kind of fits that mold while they go into these negotiations. There's names like Bruce Meyer, who the players like. That name has been thrown around as a potential replacement, who kind of sits in the same wavelength as Tony Clark. Pro ball player, pro big contract, pro owners spending money, and not having a floor or a salary cap. So it's going to be really interesting to see. Like I said, this is a really big hit, and this gives the owners leverage now, unfortunately, and it has the MLBPA scurrying to find a new owner. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the upcoming months as the negotiations start to heat up for December.
Absolutely. I mean, even seeing the headline still, it's crazy. It's crazy because it just came out of nowhere, one, but two, if you read into the article and obviously everything that the MLBPA is going to be fighting for this offseason, once the CBA expires, it makes me think that we're headed towards a very turmoil period in Major League Baseball. And you mentioned it. Yes, there's going to be some candidates that are being voted on. I believe it will be tomorrow. Let me just pull it up real quick. Yes, right here, via Jeff Pass in the 4:30 p.m. call today with the MLBPA leadership ended without having a vote on an interim executive director. However, they're expected to hold a vote for tomorrow. So we'll see how that happens and what goes down with that, because it's very critical that they find somebody, even if it is an interim person that could take that throne, because they need it. They need it big time. They know what they're fighting for this offseason. Obviously, we've heard the rumblings of a salary cap. That's been big time a topic when it comes to the owners. And will that be, even more so fueling now with something like this happening? I honestly, it's hard to believe that it wouldn't be, in my opinion, in a situation like this.
Yeah, and not for nothing, there's going to be so much pressure on this new director that comes in, having to negotiate this CBA, which is probably going to be one of the most important CBAs in the history of the game, and it's going to be his focus. Collectively trying to bargain, obviously, and stay away from these off the field controversies, because it's going to be too detrimental to the MLB Players Association if there's more controversy, or the same controversy is coming up where they just can't seem, to beat it off, and just try to focus on the important topics, which would be obviously trying to get these players what they want, and they're going to have to stabilize the leadership, obviously, and the stakeholders. They're going to have to rebuild confidence with the stakeholders in the MLB, with the Players Association as well, and try to smooth things over and really gain that confidence back to make it look like, hey, we'll get over this. This was just an unfortunate situation at a really bad time, and, we'll see it through. But I think if you're a player right now who's on the cusp of, having a big payday, and this happens, it's definitely a gut punch. And if you're one of the guys that got his bag and is trying to fight for the players, you're like, oh, this is just the complete opposite of what we need right now, and trying to defend these young guys coming up who are trying to get their bag, before the new CBA, or in hopes of, getting the CBA to a point where everybody is in agreement, where maybe it's a player-friendly deal where, there is no floor and there is no salary cap and guys can continue to make big money. But I tell you right now, it's going to be tough for the MLBPA to have to just pivot and find somebody that's going to kind of have the same ideals as Tony Clark did.
Yeah, now kind of bring that up again because, as Paston said, a vote is expected to happen as soon as possibly tomorrow. And that leads me to think that MLB PA has a few names in mind, which they should. They obviously should. They didn't expect a situation like this to obviously take place. I mean, who knew? When I saw that headline earlier, my jaw dropped immediately just because of the headline in general and, how serious that could be. But I'm assuming that the MLBPA, like you said, a few names that you mentioned, they have trusted interim replacements. And I think that is good to know. However, it is going to be very important that they do end up picking the right guy because, yeah, this is a huge offseason for them. It kind of just, like I said, adds more fuel to the fire when it comes to salary cap discussion. And we're going to see how that plays out big time. But, man, I'll tell you one thing right now. A lot of the owners, seeing that obviously this taking place today, they were probably thinking to themselves, like, you know what? This is not a bad place for us to be in.
No, absolutely. That's a great point. And that was the next point I was going to allude to, as I had mentioned earlier. I think a lot of these owners that are pro salary cap and pro floor, they see this as a possible move that causes a little bit of instability for the Players Association, and while gaining a leg up in leverage in negotiation talks when that comes to fruition in December. And like I said, I was reading into this, and they can actually start pre-negotiating up in the summer. They can actually start in the summer
Right.
and get those talks warmed up. They're not official talks, but they're kind of like groundbreaking talks to see where everybody is at. And
Exactly.
that right there is just as important as when talks actually mean something. So those preliminary talks, just to get an idea of where everybody sits and kind of has their viewpoints, and that's all laid out. That could be a problem heading into negotiations for December, because if the new guy comes in and they can't see eye to eye in those preliminary talks, it's going to be a long negotiation and a long offseason. To the point where this is going to spill out and probably ruin the whole year. Something like this now is just it's like getting all four of your tires stabbed right before you have to go to work. It's
Basically,
like,
yeah.
I don't need this right now. I don't need 4 flat tires and I have to be in work in 30 minutes. That's what this kind of feels like. It's like, what are we going to do in order to get this done? And obviously the Players Association is going to have to come to a vote tomorrow. And like I said, I think a guy that everybody seems to be leaning is Bruce Mayer, who was an executive as well. To maybe take the reins and head into these negotiations. So we'll see. It really comes down to what the players are going to do and who they're going to have represent them in these union talks.
Yeah, and hold up 1 second. And yeah, kind of just going back to this real quick. The union's 8-player executive subcommittee asked Clark to resign because, yeah, if you see the headline, obviously, an inappropriate relationship with his sister-in-law, a union employee.
Yeah, that's brutal.
Yeah, that's absolutely brutal. It's brutal for numerous of reasons. It's brutal for obviously, like you said, mentioned the funds and everything like that, misplaced funds or misused funds. That's one thing, but also brutal for bro's personal life. I mean, that's absolutely cooked. I'll be honest. I can't be doing stuff like that. Um,
No.
nah. So yeah, that's a horrible look. Horrible look. I think now, like you mentioned it, and I absolutely agree with you. This now gets me at a point of more so fear where there could be major impacts for next year's baseball season. And the fact that, yeah, if they're not on the same page, whoever the interim replacement is, let's say, I think that could drag on a big time period. Maybe potentially even going into the season, going into the summer. Hopefully not. God forbid, really, because we love baseball here. But it could be a big time, aftermath, in my opinion, a big time fallout, more so.
Yeah, and not for nothing, whoever had this information on Tony Clark knew to drop the bomb perfectly. This was, I mean, you want to talk about really blowing up some, internal confidential information. This was probably something that they definitely probably didn't even know about, or maybe they did and they tried to keep it under wraps and it finally got out. And now, obviously, we see here this 8-player executive subcommittee was like, hey, listen, you got to go because this is just not going to work when we have negotiations in 10 months. You know, in the next 10 months, we're going to start negotiating heavy and things are going to get serious. And, you know, we're talking about a lockout that could ruin the whole season, not just a couple of months of the season. We're talking about a whole 2027 completely wiped out due to this. And like we just said, if they don't have a guy that they're 100% confident with going into those negotiations, the owners are just going to say, hey, we don't have to play baseball. You know, you guys aren't going to get paid. We're going to save money. And
Yeah.
we have all the leverage now because your own leader, your top dog leader, decided to have an inappropriate relationship with his sister-in-law and misuse funds. On top of that, to the point where
Yeah.
the FBI is now involved in a federal investigation. So there's two issues looming over the MLBPA in a time where you just can't have things loom over you right now.
Yeah. I couldn't even have said it better right there. I think this is just brutal for the MLBPA now having to pivot in this manner, but had to be done obviously when it comes to some serious shit like this. And we'll see how this plays out. Obviously, I think we'll probably find out within the next 24 to 48 hours who's the interim replacement for Tony
Mhm.
Clark. And God knows that they need to find one immediately because, yeah, it has to be a form of stability they need to have going into these negotiation talks. But always, we want to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions on this situation right here. And how do you guys think that it could impact Major League Baseball next year in 2027? So let us know, obviously. JB, do you want to say anything before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I just, you know, obviously, if you're a young player right now, I kind of feel for the young guys because it looks like their future is just up in the air. You got guys that are on the cusp of being paid, and now it's not only is there a negotiation that has to be done, but you have to find a new president and a new executive for your union because there's scrutiny and there's some horrible allegations against that man, and it's just not a good look. And you're probably saying, obviously there's a lot of people in this world that don't feel bad for baseball players and athletes because they know they'll get their money at some point. But obviously, it's a little disconcerting, and it's a little, there's a little bit of an uncertain black cloud over the game right
Absolutely.
now for next year, and people aren't millionaires yet, like some of these guys, and they're not well off yet, and they're waiting to get that big bag and support their families. And this is obviously going to take a hit for at least a year. I see this now spilling into a full year. I always thought that this negotiation was going to take a full season out of the game and we were going to lose baseball for 2027. But now that there's a potential new president, and is that president going to get up to speed in time for negotiations? Too many questions for me to feel confident about what's going on right now in Major League Baseball when it comes to this negotiation.
Yes, I think JB's cause for concerns are rightfully so. It's obviously one thing that we're going to keep our eyes on, especially because, like I said, we love baseball on this channel, and we hope that 2027 in general isn't as impacted as it looks like it's going to be now. But like I said, let us know what you guys think in the comments section. As always, make sure to subscribe here to JBM Sports Media on YouTube. Follow us on IG and TikTok at JBM Sports Media. Till the next one, we'll see you guys later. Peace.